In my just-rented apartment on Atlanta's East Side, I was sprawled out on the tiny sofa with a cup in one hand of steaming tea while the other rested on my forehead, perhaps attempting to dispel the lightheadedness caused by an abundance of text messages. The coffee table calls from Mom and Dad caused my phone's screen to blink. My brother Brandon's 3 names kept flashing like an unending felt, as though the phone might blow up from sheer quiet if I didn't answer for another second. Overflow. 6 months have passed since I left that house, and there have been no disputes. Despite the dramatic door slamming, I packed a few clothing in private and didn't cry. I packed my finance notebook and my old laptop in a faded duffel bag and went outdoors as the sun was setting. Buildings across the street, and nobody asked me where I was going, stopped me, or thought I wouldn't return. They were accustomed to Diana, the dependable and laid-back daughter. I was the unseen solution to every family financial crisis. Always. Paying the power bills when things became tight. Someone who filled in whenever Brandon lost a job or when parents failed to pay for a fresh pair of originally. I used to believe that I was strong enough to do everything that was right. Was my responsibility. But now that I'm in this small apartment that's barely large enough for me, and the quiet that I at last comprehended, after over a decade of maintaining a system, I never created a system that I was the sole operator of. I didn't hear the phone vibrate again, but everyone else did. I could already hear the beginning of the message in my mind. How could you do this to your mother? I had to investigate to find out. If you still care about us, call back right now, was the family's closing statement, and I didn't pick up. I simply leaned my head back and took a long breath without even reaching for the phone. Breath, and saw that my chest was getting a little lighter every second. My name is Diana Miller, and I'm a 28-year-old finance. I had thought that if I worked hard, I could get a full scholarship to Georgia State University as an analyst. If I kept my head down and avoided problems, I would be recognized. But the truth is that the more I mattered, and the phone sounded like a fire alarm the one time I paused. Fire, Brandon, 32. Left art school after 2 years and worked as a barista. After that, a delivery driver lost his job once more, although he had potential. Dad defended the dreamer like a hero coming home from battle. Mom loved him when he failed, and I was the one who never left a debt trail, never derailed a single plan, and never made any requests. Ultimately turned out to be the unappreciative one. I recall the day I left Mom being Brandon was stretched while watching her favorite TV show as her father's eyes were fixed on the auto insurance spreadsheet. No one queried why I wasn't clothed when I passed by carrying a bag while he was lounging on the couch with his gaming console. Where are you going for employment? And after 6 months of silence, they seemed to be attempting to contact me as if I were their lifeline. Yet they abruptly want me back. I took another look at the phone. I left it ringing without turning it off, and every vibration felt like evidence that, for the first time in my life, I had finally escaped the invisible rope that had held me back for 10 years. I began working at the age of 16, not to purchase anything, and living independent smelt like a peaceful afternoon where every sound belonged to me alone. Adorable attire or frequent coffee shops like my pals, but because I was aware that if I rode my bike while my classmates were being picked up by their parents because no one else would take care of me. To sweep floors and wipe down tables, I rode my bike 4 blocks to a bakery business. I went home after dark and purchased a used PC with my first salary, the only I was able to keep up with my coursework, since no one inquired about my need for assistance, whether I was getting enough sleep or if I had eaten dinner, but Brandon needed a new laptop even if he had dropped out. Mom bought him a brand new MacBook and opened a credit card without any issues, stating that he needed it to restart his I was accustomed to that reverse reasoning in my life. So when I performed correctly, it was expected. When Brandon made a mistake, it was because he was attempting to work with someone who was 4 years older than me. But based on our household dynamics, you would assume that I was the oldest sister because he always had an when he departed his work at the bookshop. His excuse was always understood because the boss was overbearing, and his mother immediately defended him, saying that no one can live with a toxic dad had just fixed the automobile when he lost it, and his first words were, "Accidents happen me." When I received a full scholarship to attend Georgia State, the only reply was, "Couldn't you choose a, when I was hired by the largest company, Brandon might require the car for school closer to home." Mom just added, "That's how far he'll take," referring to an investment consulting firm in the region. Us to our doctor's visits. To be honest, I can't recall the last time they expressed pride in me. I used to believe that if I simply kept putting in the effort and demonstrating my worth, they would ultimately notice. But when they wanted to repaint the house, "Could you help a little?" The more I worked, the more I became a walking wallet. "Diana, when Brandon wanted to enroll in an online painting course, could you handle it for the time being? We'll talk later at." I initially believed it was only short-term financial difficulties, so I occasionally offered assistance, but occasionally it turned into everything, including petrol money for Dad's car, appliance repairs, and electric payments. Sent the money on a regular basis. "No thanks, just additional requests, because this month is a little tight." "Could you elaborate a bit?" I tried to keep silent, telling myself that I was supporting that family together, but each time I returned home after putting in weeks of labor, Mom would be there if she saw Brandon playing video games while relaxing on the couch with his feet on the table. Dad would recite the same tale about how my kid won an art competition back in the day while he was in the kitchen preparing his favorite cuisine. I'm not heartless. In 5th grade, I used to give a damn about the little things. But the living, a life where failure is hailed as a victory and work is invisible, is something I can no longer do. One day, when I told my mother that I was accumulating money to buy a place of my own, she remarked something casual that I will never forget. "Are you concerned that people won't want to marry you because she's purchasing a property on her own?" I didn't respond. But that was the realization that I would never truly gain their favor, not because I wasn't good enough, but Brandon would always come first in their eyes. So when things went wrong, I was only the fallback option, and that. Fact is, as bitter as 6 months ago, it strengthened me, and when I eventually left, I was the only member of the family to realize. So I just went without crying or screaming. I recall that if I didn't preserve myself, I would always be the one maintaining equilibrium in a world that is skewed toward someone else. "We recently lost power, Dad, and it all began with a single message from Mom late one evening while I was still at work. Could you please assist me pay this month's bill? I'll reimburse you tomorrow." Sent $1,260 that evening and a text message after that. I obviously didn't see a dime back then, but it was time to remind Dad to pay a little earlier. Dad's gas stove, repair supplements, and the water bill both included At first I thought, it's okay, I make decent, because the explanation seemed so logical that it would have felt cruel to say no. Money. However, that small assistance soon turned into everything they needed, so they stopped asking. Brandon signed up for a signing this week, and they sent him $200.00. Here's the bank for a Photoshop class, or Dad's recent expensive dental work. Details. I became the only provider for a household of 4, with 2 people working sometimes, and a person who played video games all day. 1 month when I was getting ready to apply for a mortgage on my first house, Dad called. "Diana, we're in a bit of a bind with the bank," he said in an uncomfortable but authoritative tone. I remained silent about the house being small, since it might be foreclosed upon if we are unable to locate the money in the coming weeks. I used to dream of having my own workplace at the place where I grew up. A couch bed took the place of that fantasy, so Brandon could return for the time being. "What amount do you require?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Around $980 per month for a few months, perhaps, until your dad and I are able to return to our feet." And I concurred that the initial transfer took place that same evening. I ended up transferring the money after canceling the deposit on the apartment I had been eyeing for a few months, yet nearly 2 years had passed. $20,000 in total, excluding extra costs such as auto insurance and roof repairs. At Brandon's birthday, it was their behavior, not the money, that infuriated me the most. Like it was usual, no thanks, and nobody hesitated to ask if I could afford it. I gradually turned into the family bank with no say in the matter when I asked for more. Brandon was still unemployed when I took over the house I was keeping from. Foreclosure. Mom just replied, "He's trying to find his path, you shouldn't," when asked directly. Compel him. Compel me, the one putting in 60 hours a week to cover his part, and now that I'm the one applying pressure, I began discreetly, recording each payment and date as though I was maintaining a client's debt ledger, which they would never pay back, but I never planned to request it back because I knew I would never see a dollar. Because every time I considered severing relations, a message would appear saying, "Dad's back is acting up. Could you please order his medications once more? The roof has been leaking for the past week, and nobody has the money to replace it, so I'd give in once more. I would transfer the funds once more and postpone all of my personal objectives. Began avoiding using my banking app in the mornings because I felt incapable of handling the low balance. My life was dictated by the demands of individuals who never meant to be independent and by their bills. I spent a week eating instant noodles while living in a small rental apartment in order to transfer money to have a door fixed in the Brandon's idea for his art studio was a house. And one day, he was standing in. When I opened my wallet at the convenience shop and realized I didn't have enough money to buy a gallon of milk, I really felt it. I used to believe that being strong meant bearing all the weight, yet I was becoming exhausted. Actually, I was only praying that things would change while I was falling into a swamp, and the instant I discovered that I had to get dressed first because it began to rain on Sunday afternoon. I was fatigued after a long weekend shift and simply wanted a nice blanket and a hot shower, but I stopped. Like I had done, I picked up a couple bags of food at the store and drove about 40 minutes to my folks' place. For 2 years in a row, I entered the kitchen with bags of salmon. As I placed some frozen dinners and vegetables down, my mother was already there and didn't want to welcome me. But before I could confront you, Deanna, we needed to speak. She exhaled, folded her arms, and spoke in a dramatic tone that we had already covered. "This is what you send each month, but it's not enough anymore. I'm frozen. What are you doing?" Speaking of Dad, he entered the room from the living room, his voice thick and low as if he were giving you the evening news. "Earn a nice living while living alone. While we struggle daily. Isn't it right? Sound unjust to you? But I stood there and gazed at the two individuals who reared me. I remained silent as they attempted to persuade me that I had a duty to provide their comfort. Consistently, I have paid off my mortgage for the past 2 years, along with my utilities and roof. Brandon laid out on the couch after fixing everything, but it's still insufficient. Nonchalantly added, as usual, that it's not like you're lacking anything. It was improper to share a bit, so I turned to face my 32-year-old. A sibling who feels entitled to speak on what sharing, even though he has never paid a bill in his life, implies that sharing is reciprocal, Brandon. I remarked, sounding as icy as the rain. All you ever do outside is snap at your mother. That's enough, Diana. You're being I'm rude because I took a deep inhale and felt like my chest was going to burst. Mom's lips squeezed into that tight line, revealing the truth. The look she gave when she wanted to exert total control over everything out of outrage. "If it's that much of a hardship for you," she spoke in a blade, "then you can leave and don't bother returning." If only she had known, that sentence would have been stopped. How frequently it replayed in my head. Yet nobody attempted to stop me this time. Called me the quiet one who makes sacrifices or the decent daughter, but they didn't take me back. Simply shoved me to the brink and watched to see if I would jump. I let go of the last. I didn't even bother to open the grocery bag on the table and didn't put anything inside. The refrigerator as I usually did, and I said, "Sharp as steel, soft as a breeze. So if that's how you feel," I turned and walked out, my steps heavy, but I told you loud and clear that I was leaving. Without a doubt, nobody called my name or followed, simply Brandon saying something. Maybe it was so dramatic or something, but I left that house behind me. Empty and empty-handed, but with my back straight, the rain soaked my hair. Garments, but for the first time, I felt as though the burden I had been carrying for years passed with no responsibility, just chains, and when they finally fell, I stopped driving. I drove into a quiet gas station on my way back to my tiny apartment, opened my contacts, and looked at my parents, Brandon and Mom. Then carefully hit the block button. At that point, I wasn't sure what was approaching, and I couldn't imagine the commotion that would break out when they discovered their personal ATM was missing. Silent, but I was certain that this time I wouldn't be returning or leaving. Of pride, but because I had at last realized that compassion is limited, and blind sacrifice just makes folks assume that you'll be in my new residence by default. Was located on the third story of an ancient midtown building with deteriorated white paint and a persistently stale odor coming from the passageways. Wood, but to me it was heaven, as nobody woke me up at 6 in the morning to make an appointment with a doctor. Nobody texted me at midnight to ask whether I could pay the gas bill in advance. I moved in with just 2 people, and no one touched the bags of groceries I had to carry across 3 counties for dinner. An old comforter and suitcases. But the relief. Every morning I woke up with my alarm, made coffee, opened the window, and felt like I was learning how to breathe again. Without the TV blaring from the living room or Mom complaining, let the light flood the room. When I arrived home late, I spent the weekends reading, picking up new skills, and exploring Piedmont, instead of my dad's coughing spells. I went to a park where I wasn't forced to listen to another emergency on my phone for an hour, which somehow meant additional money. I severed all financial connections, no bill payments, no transfers, and no doctor appointments, no groceries, a gradually stable bank account, and I began saving money for the first time in years, which was a straightforward task I never imagined I could accomplish. Yet that component alone began with a text message from Mom Diana saying, "Your dad just got a bank warning letter that something was happening, so I read it, put the phone down, and didn't answer. Because I understood that it was never about health or anything, but I didn't care. Money was the primary concern, and a few days later, my dad. I didn't answer when they called, but we need to have a serious conversation because the house situation can't be pushed off any longer." Once more, each day their voices were quiet. At first, then imploring, then, "Are you really going to abandon your parents?" The angry mother texted. Brandon left I didn't hear the voicemail that said, "You should know this isn't a joke, everyone's struggling. Answer the calls," which continued coming in week after week, as if they thought I would give in if they called long enough. I blocked a few contacts and changed my work number, but occasionally I couldn't help but read the lengthy texts. Lengthy accusations that I was cold and uncaring, but I was recuperating. But as I was leaving the office one Monday afternoon, my Brandon's phone rang, and although I didn't answer, his message this time had lost the sense of urgency. It was accusing and pointed. "How do you feel?" "Congratulations. You don't have the right to leave your family because life is better now. Even if your parents lose, the I stood motionless in the parking lot, repeating the home. And that will be your responsibility." Message 3 times. And in the end, I wasn't sure if I should laugh or get upset. Thousands of cash were delivered to me without a thank you for those years of missing meals, and what I received in exchange was, "I've covered my part." I took up my phone and slowly wrote out a message. "And yours for years. If everything breaks down now, perhaps it's time for everyone to ask who never took any action." I erased it rather than sending it since I knew no words would ever alter their perception of me. I was never a sister or a daughter. Instead, I was a solution, and when it failed, they had nothing else to blame. I put my phone in my pocket. You felt a little lighter after walking along the sidewalk that was illuminated by golden light. I noticed a message from Dad Diana asking why I hadn't paid the mortgage after leaving a meeting. This month, the bank is pressuring us, and I froze in my office building's hallway. I wasn't shocked. Rather, I thought it was I stopped feeling as though someone had dumped a bucket of icy water over my head. Any financial assistance almost 6 months ago, with no money transfers at all. Conversation. But he continued to message me as if I were supposed to keep paying the mortgage, but his words were what really irritated me. Pressing us now. My gut warned me as I bit my lip and my palms began to perspire. There was a problem. And instead of guessing this time I was going to discover that evening, I unlocked my laptop and logged in after making a cup of tea. I had never deposited money into the bank account I used to pay my mortgage to the one in my father's name. I had previously verified it and always believed that the money would be utilized for what they claimed I was theirs after I sent it. Why wouldn't I go through the transaction history of all the payments I've made over the last 2 years, daughter? Documented exactly matched, but the last sentence warmed my heart. Almost halt the most recent mortgage payment from the account, which was made 8 months prior. I blinked a few times before I stopped helping in case I misread something, but it was obvious. The bank's alert account shows that the balance is past due by 8 months, $6,480 remaining, and in danger of foreclosure, put a palm over my lips in an attempt to stop my own breathing. What did this indicate? That I had kept sending money on 3 more months following that final payment, and they hadn't utilized I opened my personal banking app after paying just $1 for the mortgage, and sure enough, after the last payment, about $3,000 was sent. They received it, but they didn't use it, didn't explain, and didn't say anything. Not only was I disappointed, but I also felt betrayed, as if someone had stabbed me in the back. I didn't call right away, because I needed more, even though I trusted them. Evidence. I called the bank the following morning, this claiming as someone who had previously assisted in handling household expenses, and I politely voiced my worries that my parents may be having difficulties and not telling me after the support. Representative has verified that since the start of the year, the account has not received a full mortgage payment. It is currently under special. I thanked her and hung up, and without a doubt, the world whirled around me. I didn't know where the money I sent during those final months went, because it wasn't used for the house. I couldn't sleep that night, so I left the light on and lay rigid on the couch, not for what they had pleaded for. One question kept coming to me as I stared at the ceiling. How long had they been there? Lying to me, I considered all the things my mother used to say. If it weren't for you, honey, it's only temporary. Your dad is scared that we will starve him. Please help us get through this. And then I recalled Brandon's expression the day I left. Not with regret, but I was afraid because the source was drying up, not because I was going. I grabbed up my phone, typed a message to my dad, and told the bank that the mortgage was 8 months past due. Continued transferring money, but what occurred was that there was no response for 15 minutes. Later, the phone rang, and I sat there listening to Calorade Dad instead of answering. The ringtone reverberates like a ghost from a past I naively accepted, but now eventually spoke for itself. At 10 p.m., the third call arrived. I was in a maelstrom of rage and despair as I stared at the screen with my hands freezing. Knew they wouldn't stop if I didn't answer, and I was prepared to listen, but I'm also prepared to talk. So I hit Answer Diana. Dad spoke in a stern, quiet voice, so I assume you learned about the bank. I kept my voice calm. I verified that the mortgage is 8 months, so I didn't simply learn. I kept sending money behind him. So where did it go? He paused, then let out a sigh. I understand that you're upset, but I didn't give you a bitter half. I don't think I sent money for the house, but it wasn't paid for. What aspect of that didn't? I believe was the reason Mom picked up the phone, Diana, she said in a high-pitched, almost irate voice. Don't you dare talk to your father like that. You don't comprehend the circumstances. Everything has been falling apart ever since you went. I moved with my eyes narrowed. Either gone, or when I stopped making sure everyone had a comfortable life. You don't. My mother angrily retorted, I've done everything I could. Brandon lost his job. Your father's back is weak. Acting irrationally, the house is collapsing, and you simply ignored us. Mom, I whispered, dropping my voice, and then I turned away once you had used up all of your energy. $1 from me and still had the audacity to claim that it wasn't enough and that I wasn't required to pay for your persistently poor options. She went quiet for a short while before trembling and resuming her voice in that familiar, we practiced crying, Deanna. Our families are... I interrupted her for the first time, not letting her guide us, even though we were meant to support one another. There's a limit to my emotional support, Mom, and I've been treated like a free ATM for years. Worse, you deceived. Me and the money I provided wasn't even used for what you said. I believed she had hung up because the wait was so long, but then Brandon's voice interrupted. You're out of proportion. They only require a little time, and you're behaving as though the entire I laughed and said, the world owes you something, but this house. Brandon snarled that you weren't like this, so you're obviously being selfish. I was just a dumb Diane before I answered in a quiet voice like ice. Talk like that? My dad returned with a more worn-down tone, and we made a mistake. However, you are our only resource, and I swear to repay you. I let out a dry, dejected laugh. How many times have you assured me that there would be no more prolonged silence? He said we're going to lose everything if you don't help, and we might lose the house. My chest grew heavy as I gripped the phone, more tightly. Yet my words were clear. That's no longer my responsibility, Diana, so stop it. You can't just leave after I've been raising this family for almost 10 years, and when Brandon was sitting around burning money, I finally snapped. And condemning me, and as soon as I stop, I'm the callous one. Mom sobbed once again. Dad began begging after Brandon whispered something in her ear. Although I wasn't really, I took a big breath and decided I was done since I could no longer hear them. Their voices echoing like ghosts from a world I no longer belong to. I'm helping because I've done more than you all need, not because I'm being mean. The only thing I'm leaving behind is to learn how to live without me. And After that last call, I turned off my phone and hung up. Not out of rage, but in calm. I kept it on the table for 3 whole days without sending any texts, calls, or threats. I had never experienced stillness so sweet, and I was crying, pretending to be silent. I got up early the following morning, prepared myself some coffee, and went outside to the balcony to see the city. I awaken in the gentle golden light of my modest, unremarkable flat. The hardwood floor creaked beneath my feet, and the ceiling was a touch low, but for the first time, belonged to me, and nobody was phoning to demand money or making me feel bad. It found out that living freely wasn't noisy. Rather, it was, silence might be frightening, yet it can also be peaceful and soft, like the first breath after emerging from the water's surface. When it gets dark and I have nothing else to think about, I wonder whether I went too far in cutting off all assistance and contact and letting the house go. The people who raised me helped me save Teeter, who was on the verge of going into foreclosure. Was the backbone. But now I was the one who allowed the turmoil to be navigated alone. Was I being too harsh? I returned to the voicemail I had been avoiding. Mom's message throughout the week was, "You'll regret this. Your house means everything. Dad told me that if you don't help, we won't have any other options." Brandon was brief, and I listened to every word and didn't skip a single one, but I'm upset that you're allowing this family to fall apart because of your pride. I didn't cry this time. I just felt worn out. They always managed to make I doubted myself for years, and they bound me with guilt rather than bars. Phrases such as, "You're the pride of this family," and "We'd be lost without you." However, Such pride was never expressed as appreciation. Rather, it served as a shield they raised any time they needed protection from mistake that they refused to correct. I reflected on all the evenings I spent staying up late doing math for customers. Only to Brandon was berating me when I woke up for not living in the present. My parents unexpectedly needed money, so I had to cancel the one annual vacation I had planned and considered my mother's expression when I stated that I was worn out, not sympathy nor comprehension, just disappointment, as though, despite being the only one who never abandoned them, I had violated her trust. The same question persisted as I sat on the side of the bed in my room, fingers tracing the edges of an old, faded blanket, reverberating in my mind. What if they actually lose the house? What if I get a call one day? Would I feel bad if I said, "My parents have nowhere to live," since I'm the one who prevented them from? Since I stopped 6 months ago, the nearly 10 years of falling apart cannot be undone, yet people forget things easily. I groaned. Perhaps I wasn't the ideal person. Guilt doesn't require an excuse to seep in. Perhaps I was too strict, daughter, but I wouldn't have anything if I hadn't made the boundary. I'm not sharing this story since all that's left is a broken heart and an empty wallet. Commended, I don't want to wait for confirmation that I was correct. I just want to find out if anyone else has ever experienced the same emotions as me. If someone has ever been considered frigid for simply refusing, they have been given the burden of an entire family. I genuinely want to know if I did the right thing. Once, if you're still reading this. I made the decision to live for myself, but is there a cost I haven't yet seen? I understand, but I'm hoping you can offer me a fresh viewpoint, a message, or an honest phrase, because occasionally Diana's tale serves as a wake-up call for me. To know that I'm not alone in order to go ahead. Call out to anyone who has ever been assigned duties that weren't theirs and branded the nice kid. She sacrificed her independence and tranquility for years in order to be faithful to a family, concept that provided no benefits. However, after realizing that her value was being diminished, she found the strength to speak up and leave. Her narrative isn't just about escape, serves as a reminder that setting firm boundaries is the first step toward true love. Do you believe Diana was correct? Should she have attempted to escape the cycle of imposed responsibility? To reach a compromise, leave your comments below and remember to subscribe to the channel for additional updates, inspiring tales of family decisions and discovering your